All right, so let's introduce our teams. We can start that. First of all, we are going to have 3 prizes. Prizes for overall winner, and we do have a point adjustment by Kinjal and Allison. If people have such great negative points, we have to readjust the scores in the middle part of the game. We have most spirit, which will be most team spirit, which will be voted on by audience members at the end of the game. And then we have the most team tweets, which we will review in a second. So our teams today are the board of directors, which include Amy Kaji, Ali Raja, and Chris Carpenter. Please notice their hashtag. Rams, Chad Mayer, Wendy Sun, and Shayna Zucker. Again, this is all going out on Simpler, so that's how we're going to track who has the most tweets. And then the editors, Diane Kuhn, Ken Milne, and Zach Mizell. Are we on? Can everybody check their mic?
Check.
It doesn't look like Rams's mic's working.
Oh, thank you. You didn't
okay.
have to.
That's
really nice of you. Oh, it's for you. Oh.
I did notice the board of directors fooling with that mic a few minutes ago, Chad.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Would everybody like to check to make sure their buzzers work? Do your buzzers work over here?
Good on 5. 5.
All right, here are today's categories. Basic definitions, broken hearts, sex and drugs, crash and boom, not enough diversity, and action plan. All right, Rams, you have the board. Choose your first number. One of you guys can keep score.
Good morning.
We'll take sex and drugs for 100.
Ethanol and likely zolpidem get chewed up by this stomach enzyme that's revved up by testosterone.
What is alcohol dehydrogenase?
Yes, Rams, start off strong.
Why are we closer to step 2 than we are?
Where's my bear?
Why are we surprised that the residents know more about drugs? Yeah. Alcohol. Enzymes.
For close calls, make sure your buzzers are visible so that the judges, because it might be that millisecond swimmer touching the wall, the difference between the winners and the losers in the SAEM Jeopardy game. Go ahead, Rams.
All right, let's go for diversity for 400.
This country recently admitted that several of its medical schools added points to make male applicant scores higher and limit the entrance of women.
Waiting for the judge.
Judge, yes, go ahead.
What is Japan?
Yes. So I'm just going to let you read this because if I read it, my head's going to pop up and I'm not going to be able to talk for the next hour. This is 2019, everybody. Japan wanted to limit its amount of female medical students to less than 30%. Okay, Rams.
Okay, so we're going to do basic definitions for 200.
A person whose biological sex aligns with their gender identity is called this.
Cis.
Just as a reminder,
Question.
what
It's
is...
not a question.
I never actually reviewed that rule. Please make sure that you answer in the what is.
What is cis?
Correct. So as a reminder to everybody, cisgender is aligning your biological sex at birth with your gender identity, and transgender is when it does not align.
Let's do sex and drugs for 200.
Until 2016, approximately this percentage of basic science research was done on male animals, within 10%.
What is 80%?
Wow! That is impressive.
Yeah, that's you can't.
So, Allison, you want to grab the T-shirts? This is a T-shirt question. Whoever in the audience actually gets this. Meta-analysis and review. Are female lab animals actually more variable than male lab animals? This is the whole reason why female lab animals were excluded from research, because they have an estrous cycle of 4 days. Anybody want a T-shirt? It's either yes or no. There's a 50% chance.
You don't lose your shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like the right.
You are correct. Funny thing about testosterone, if you don't actually control it, it can go way up and down in lab animals and affect results too.
Nice job.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
For all of you who do basic science research, in 2016, the NIH, over 20 years after its changed its guidelines for clinical research trials in humans, required that to get NIH funding, you must actually use biological sex as a variable in your lab animals.
Oh, that was not a.
All right. Rams.
We'll take sex and drugs for 300.
As rock and alcohol are water soluble, for the same dose, this sex will have a greater effect.
Male? What is male?
What is female?
So the correct answer is females, because women have less total body water, so therefore alcohol and rock is more concentrated.
Do we get points for that?
Yes, we are going to, they have no points, everybody, so we have to do this to kind of make things sort of interesting so Rams doesn't walk away with it at 8:15.
Wait, are you saying that Rams is going to win?
No, she's saying that she gave Rams the questions beforehand.
Like that was the program.
All right, Board of Directors, this is your chance to catch up.
Let's just go high. Let's just go
Yeah,
high.
let's go 500.
All right, so we'll do crash and boom for 500, whatever that means.
All right, this is the coolest study that none of us in this room probably ever heard of. In 2011, using the NAS CDC database, which is actually this very robust database, in comparable crashes involving belted drivers, women are this percentage more likely to sustain a serious injury compared to men.
Oh, that's not the end of the question. Sorry.
No, I'll give it to you that. Go ahead.
We're going to go with 20%.
Does somebody else want to try?
Oh,
What is? You have to say what is.
He didn't even get the percentage right, so.
So we know it's not 20.
And we know it's not
And it's
10 and 40
30.
by the
Yeah,
very
yeah.
broad percentage of variability I'm giving you.
What is 50%?
Still, would you guys like, they said 50%. That's still not within 10%. Oh, actually, wait. I take that back. It's 47%. This is an amazing fact. Let's just pause for a second. 47% chance. If Ken and I get in the same car crash by our differences in our biomechanics and the way the restraints are designed, I am much more likely to get injured than Ken.
It'll also be my fault.
Rams got
500.
Jeanette, can I add a point?
Yes.
I mean, maybe we can get some more points, but isn't it also because...
You want to go into the mic, Amy?
I think in the past, the engineering studies didn't include women's body habitus as a factor, and so therefore we are even more predisposed. I think the board of directors deserves...
Good point. Just for knowing that. Nice work, Amy. You're so smart. You're such an echo
You know, halfway through the game, we'll do a point adjustment. We're not there quite yet. All right, Rams. That was 500.
You get for going high.
I know, right?
By the way, nobody's repeated that study in the last 10 years, or anybody who actually is interested in doing a pretty interesting project with a good research base.
The action plan for 300?
So the action plan is we're going to answer a problem, and then everybody in the room has a little homework. After event company Bizzabo released their survey results this past November, this new meaning for the word mantle exploded on social media.
What is a panel made entirely of men?
Yes. Man-only panels. So Bizzabo looked at 60,000
Would
events.
really horrible thing and bad panel have worked as well?
Say one more time.
Would really horrible thing and bad panel that is useless and should never be done again have worked as well?
Yeah, you get an asterisk for that. I think there's some extra candy for you on that one. So 60,000 events from 2013 to 2018, almost 70% are male. The coolest thing about this, though, is the social media campaign that resulted from it. And what people could do is submit man-only conference panels, and then they would get, if David Hasselbach, good job, man-only. So here's the funniest thing about this. These are ridiculous, what panels showed up on this. Wow. So what about medical conferences? This is a big JAMA study recently, looked at tons of medical conferences from 2013 to 2017, covering a whole bunch of different specialties, found a huge variation. Overall, there was opportunities to increase diversity. So why do we care? Why do we care who's behind the podium? One, because being a national speaker, being a regional speaker is a first way to springboard a young person's academic career. And the second thing is because when you get people up here who look differently, you change perceptions and you change the cultures of our specialty. So here's our homework. Look at your grand rounds for last year. Are there any opportunities to increase the diversity of it? Here are some great resources. ADIEM just put out a speaker list. AWAEM has a wonderful time management series that will teach you how to organize your emails and to run meetings. There's a wonderful feminine speaker bureau list, and we are happy to work to get the Jeopardy game to any of your institutions if you're interested. All right. I don't even know who won that.
We did.
Okay.
And we're proud of it.
All right. Board of Directors, the board is yours.
Broken Hearts for 500.
The Cleveland Clinic decreased their gender gap in 30-day STEMI deaths after initiating a standardized protocol. Specifically, they decreased the absolute mortality of women by this percentage within 5.
What is 30%?
That would be a really great reduction in female mortality, but it's not that high.
What is 10%?
That is with, no, actually that's not. He said 10%.
Within 5.
This is like mortality. So you've got to figure a mortality difference by a protocol.
Well, he didn't say relative versus absolute.
This is absolute.
Was it a 30% relative reduction? Because I think that we should win.
It's absolute difference.
Oh, it says that. Oh, it does, yeah. I was willing to back you up.
Thanks, man.
No.
We would have heard of that.
So nobody got points for that. It was 4%. This is mortality difference, you guys. So it's hard to decrease this in absolute differences. So their protocol was really simple. They just standardized how they were going to activate the cath. They made sure they had a STEMI checklist. If there was an open room in the cath, they moved people, and they went from femoral artery access to radial artery access. This was the difference in their 30-day mortality. There was also a really big study out of Australia last year that showed these huge differences in STEMI from gender differences. The important thing here is that there wasn't a real big difference in the males. It wasn't statistically different before and after the protocol. This study shows two things, that somehow when we walk into rooms, there is a gender influence of how we treat patients. But at the end of the day, if you use this data and you use the data from Australia, there's also a biological sex difference in people who get STEMIs. And actually, the greatest mortality is in what group from STEMIs? Does anybody know? This is a t-shirt question. What group, men and women, has the greatest 30-day mortality after an ST elevation MI? You will be surprised. Anybody? For a t-shirt.
50-50.
Elderly women.
Women under the age of 60. They have the highest mortality of anybody from a STEMI. And it's probably because they have a combination of increased risk factors and different microvascular disease.
Decreased recognition.
Yeah.
All right, since none of you guys got that one, we're going to go to you guys to pick the next question.
Oh, okay. We'll take, I want the,
Go big. Go big.
go big? Okay, so I'll take the basic definitions for 500. Alex.
Alexa. Correct term for someone who's assigned sex at birth is female, has a male gender identity, and is physically attracted to females.
Was a straight transgender man?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it wouldn't.
For those of you who need to get a little updated in these rapidly changing definitions, there was a great paper put out by many people involved in this within the field of emergency medicine by Tracy Madsen in The Gender and the Genome in 2017. The important thing is that our gender identity is distinct from our sexual orientation. Rams.
I went big. I got to go home now.
Basic definitions for 400?
In sex and gender-based research, SABV refers to this.
What is sex and biological variable?
We will give you that. What is sex as a biological variable? So I want you to think about biological sex like age. Sometimes it doesn't make a difference, and sometimes it can be critically important. So if Ken and I both have young kids and we all sprain our ankle, probably doesn't matter how you treat a sprained ankle if you're 18 versus if you're 45. However, if Ken and his kid both come in with chest pain, we would do a different evaluation based on their complaint. That's how I want you to think about biological sex. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it can be critically important. But we're to the point that we can no longer ignore the fact of its relevance. All right, Rams. Sex and drugs for 500, please. This medication side effect is more likely to occur in women.
What's prolonged QTC?
Wonderful. And for a t-shirt in the audience, why do men not get as much prolonged QTC compared to women? The beards, yeah. Testosterone increases your potassium channels. Increased potassium channels increases your repolarization and shortens your QTC. So as people age and their testosterone levels go down, their increased risk of having QTC side effects. So to remind people, here are some of the common offenders. Psychotic meds are up there too, clearly. We are in a brand new age. If we actually want to make sure we're optimizing the care of all of our patients, we need to begin to take some of these biological variables associated with sex and gender more seriously. There's also a big gender component when we talk about pharmacology because women are more likely to go to their doctors, they're more likely to get a prescription, and they're more likely to have many times other disease processes based on their biological sex, like anxiety and depression, for which they're on medication that increases their risk of adverse side effects. All right. I don't even know who got that one. You guys?
Probably Rams.
Rams 400?
Yeah.
I just default to the same.
Rams.
Women are more likely to get this cardiac condition shown on the following ultrasound clip that can be seen after a huge catecholamine.
No.
Yeah. So do you think maybe their buzzer just works better? Should we switch the buzzer?
I mean, they're younger. They have faster reaction time.
Kinja, can I ask, do we need a score readjustment yet?
Are we still positive?
I was for
400.
Get used to rejection.
Wow.
Burn.
Oh, second place. We'll take it. Fine.
Rams, would you be okay if we at least got their score back to 0?
Ooh, that's a lot of pressure.
All right. They all want jobs from you and references someday.
And papers.
Yeah, remember their kindness. You guys have the board?
Action plan for 400, please.
According to a 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey, this percentage of respondents reported that in the past year, they avoided needed health care evaluation due to fear of being mistreated.
What's 23%?
23%.
I presented on this.
I swear to God, you guys didn't get my slides.
Oh, sure.
Is it really 23%?
No way.
How long ago did you give them the question? That's what I want to know.
Oh my gosh, you were at my presentation when I presented that number.
You could have at least said 20.
That was,
Still some doubt.
Yeah, this is very.
I think that was 500 or 400.
See?
So we know that the LGBT, oh my goodness, we know that this community has a disproportionate amount of chronic health issues, psychological disorders, addiction, STDs, trauma. And if you look at the statistics in minority, it's scary. So the most important thing are the quotes. For those of you who have not read Liz Samuel's 2018 Annals of Emergency Medicine paper, these quotes should all give us pause to how we can do a little bit better job. I'm just going to read 3 of them. I think it's knowing that you're going to have to explain yourself over and over and over again. And just like it's exhausting thinking about it before you even go. And it's kind of like the determining factor, is it serious enough to go through all this just to have something checked out? Another person said, at any one time, I've seen upwards of 10 staff members in that little area. And you might not want to say something to one person, let alone 10. And then the final one, they're kind of uncomfortable because they look at you one way and then they have to tell them, you know, I'm trans. And I don't really want to tell them that because I just want to tell them I'm male. But the way they look at you when they see your registration, it's kind of really uncomfortable. They kind of look at me funny because they didn't know how to react or something. It was really awkward and uncomfortable. I felt everybody was like staring at me and my face was turning all red. It was just a horrible experience. How can we do better? 3 simple things. Ask their name, ask their pronoun, and then take the time to huddle with the people who are most likely to interact with them to make sure they don't have to go through all those questions again. All right, Rams, yet again.
Crash and move to 300.
You guys have a chance in this one, I can feel it. Volvo engineers created Linda, a virtual test dummy that had this special characteristic. Yes, board of directors. Let me say that again. Yes, board of directors.
What is pregnancy?
Yes. Woo!
Yeah.
So, little known fact, people are more likely to have a fetal loss in a car accident than to lose a kid. And you never really think about that. Think about how much research and device development to make sure our kids are safe in cars, and we haven't done that for pregnant women. And yet we know that they're at huge risk for problems if they don't wear their seatbelt right, if they're too close to the steering wheel. And there's even some interesting data that comes out if you're in the back seat and you have the belt on, you're at increased risk for having carotid intimal vascular injuries because of the way the belt's crossing against your neck because your body habitus is changing. All right, board of directors.
What is, oh, sorry, just getting in the habit. We'll go with not enough diversity for 500, please.
Oh, this is a daily double.
We have, let's go. We're in Vegas.
All in?
We're all in.
For your $300. The percentage of this 2017 medical school class that self-identified as LGBTQ.
What is 8%?
All right, Amy.
Nice job, Amy.
You're up to
So good at this.
Concerningly, 30% never admitted it to their colleagues. All right, board of directors.
Go with action plan for 500.
This is a chance for you guys, again, just saying on this side. A recent study suggests that pregnant women who find out they are having girls compared to women who don't choose to find out or who are having boys change their behavior in this way. Rams, you can afford to guess. All right, a t-shirt in the audience. Does anyone want to guess what this might be? You get a t-shirt even if you guess wrong. Yes, take less risk. So I include this study to remind us that gender happens before the baby even comes out of the uterus. And how gender and sex, we like to think that there are lines in the sand that are easily separable, but in reality, in many, many instances, they smear from one into the other. For example, in that study, if in your biological sex you decide, I'm now having a girl and I'm now going to feel more anxious when I'm in high-risk situations, you could have an increased cortisol surge that will go into your placenta. And this is for a t-shirt in the audience. The irony of this study, which sex actually has the much higher infant mortality in developed countries? Males. Testosterone delays your lung development by about a week, so premature males are much more likely to die compared to premature females. That is not the case in third world countries because that is totally a gender difference because little girls often are more likely to be aborted or not get appropriate medical care. So why do we try to separate these two things in research? We try to do it because when we have a biological sex difference, when we find that there's a different level, like in high sensitivity troponins or even in CBCs for males and females, many times it's a technological switch. When we find that there's a gender difference, many times the fix is education and developing things to prevent our own human error, such as these protocols that Cleveland Clinic did, so that you have to opt out of something instead of opting into something. So the action plan, the next time you read a paper or evaluate somebody else's paper, look to see, is there a sex difference? Is there a gender difference? And was it even on the author's radar? I think Marna gets a t-shirt for that. Woo. And by the way, we need to applaud our editors because we have been much better in our own field of emergency medicine with submissions in the last 2 years. Candy, it's candy.
Just applause, not points.
All right, since nobody got that, who's like losing the worst, and they can have the board?
The editors.
The editors.
I went big and now I have to go home, so somebody else has to pick.
All right, we will go crash and boom for 400.
In 2011, many cars saw their star safety ratings go down after new regulations mandated posting results of front seat passenger testing, including this. Don't overthink this. It's pretty. Okay, what do we put in cars to test them when they crash?
Dummies.
What kind of dummies do we usually put in?
What are women dummies?
Maybe. Maybe female dummies.
Is that gonna
Yes, that's good.
Well, you didn't say dummy.
I did not say that.
Clear.
To let you know, again, that we don't study what's not on our radar. Look at this car. This is a car that is sold for families. We know that when men and women are in a car together, that men are statistically more likely to drive. So the Sierra minivan had their star rating crash because their standard was a 40% severe injury rate from a 35-mile-per-hour head-on crash. That's not even that fast compared to the industry standard of 15%.
Sex and drugs for 400.
The CDC estimates that this percentage of women take 4 or more drugs during their pregnancy, within 10%. Vitamins are not included in this.
Well, come on. What is 20%?
No.
What is 40%?
We'll give you that. And a t-shirt for the audience. The CDC estimates about this percentage of drugs we actually have good data as safety for pregnancy. Anybody who raises their hand is going to get a t-shirt here. So, yes. About 10%. So we've protected pregnant women from research for years, and we've indirectly now have a lack of information that we can give people when they're pregnant as to which drugs are actually safe.
Let's go.
All right. You guys got it.
I mean, the Rams, they're going to take it. Basic definitions for 300, please.
This chromosome contains approximately 426 genes.
What is the X chromosome?
What is the Y chromosome?
Just saying that little old X chromosome has about 3 times as many genes as the Y one.
So just so you know, we got like
They're back in the positive is what he's saying.
accentuate the positive.
So most of us in med school learned that outside our reproductive organs are our bikini zones, that men and women were exactly the same and that they could be easily transposed onto one another. We thought we had the same livers, the same brains, the same hearts. We now know, though, there's differences in our sex chromosomes. All those genes on both the X and Y hormones influence gene expression, regulation, immunity, other things than just produce sex hormones. We realize that the differences in our cocktail of hormonal influences affect our outcomes. Our gendered exposures affect our outcomes, what jobs we have. If Ken and I, statistically, Ken's more likely to work in a coal mine.
Always me.
It's always you.
You want to switch spots? I'm feeling picked on.
Well,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
if Ken and Zach,
Okay,
if Ken and Zach, statistically, they're more likely to work in a coal mine than in a nail polish salon. Both of those occupations are associated with a huge amount of chemical exposures. So by our gendered exposure, our epigenetics will go back and influence our gene expression and what diseases we are going to have a change of our threshold for getting. Even more interesting, however, if Zach now works in a nail polish salon and I go into a coal mine, the way the same toxin through epigenetics influences our gene expression can be totally different. So this is like cutting edge new medicine that in the next 5 years is going to be commonplace. So I'm encouraging you all to be on the upswing of this. In reality, we're not the same. This is the take-home mantra: sex matters in medicine. All right. We're getting to the home stretch here.
We get to pick. So.
Yes.
I know this is an unusual feeling for you. So.
I would like to have the diversity for 300, please.
In 2019, The Lancet published a study evaluating millions of papers and correlated the likelihood of reporting biological sex in write-up, and published papers was associated with this.
What is author gender?
Good for you, Ram! So just as an asterisk, this was simply reporting that on your demographics you have males and females. It is not about analysis. It's not about study design. This is a 2016 data. Biomedical. These are the medications and the devices that we are putting into people's bodies. They are the worst offenders here. Unchecked, we don't report what's not on our radar. There's great power in a well-placed nudge. There's a lot of influencers in this room right now. If you're on the IRB, if you're a grant funder, if you're an editor, if you're a peer reviewer, if you're evaluating conference abstracts, you have great power to nudge this forward. Please use that power wisely. All right. Who is more likely to be found in a shockable rhythm? Who's more likely to be found in a shockable rhythm after a cardiac arrest?
Who are women?
Who are men?
Men are correct.
Would have gotten that wrong. I was so hoping you would get it say the same thing.
This is an LA Ross study, and this already took into account whether bystander CPR was done. There was a difference in shockable rhythm, a difference in STEMIs, and a difference in survivorship. Again, this underscores the fact that gender is important, but also biological sex is important, because there's probably a different mechanism. Women are much more likely to have microvascular disease, which is disease in the final little bit of vessels as it goes into the muscles versus the big pipes. That leads to some of these differences in stats. Yes. It's going to be really sad if, like, the editors and board of directors don't get any prizes.
Dr. Coates, you
They're
just
never
walked
going to
in.
want to come back.
Can you handle that for us? You're tweeting a lot. Like, tweet 100 tweets.
So their tweets are board of directors,
Please.
though.
Be a boss.
It's SAEM boardroom. That's their tweets. And do you guys remember what...
Except with revisions.
And I have prizes for anybody who sends out a tweet.
Oh, come on. You might as well just tell them you're going to accept their journal articles now.
Maybe.
There might be
Second
capes. All right. Board of directors.
They're busy,
We're tweeting.
close up.
You can't just put that same one 100 times either.
We'll take broken hearts for 200, please.
This is from Dr. Safdar. Thank you for this, because I didn't know this fact. In this sex, amongst healthy adults, baseline BNP is higher, and in patients with heart failure, the value is less correlated with prognoses.
What are men?
What are women?
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
We got our mojo.
Females. Part of this is women are much more likely to have preserved ejection fracture and concentric failure, which may not bump your BNP as much as men, where men are more likely to have a reduced ejection fracture, which is more likely to bump your BNP.
What's a BNP?
Or,
Canadians.
yeah.
Canadians. What's a BNP? I've never heard one. I'm not saying I'm pro at BNP. I'm just not saying I'm anti-BNP.
So do we dare do a score update?
Yeah. No, please. Should I hand out the prizes now?
Yes. 3,000 for Rams, yes.
900?
Yeah, woo!
We're positive. I'll take it.
Oh!
Race to the bottom.
Okay. All right, I believe that the editors have, you guys got the last one, right?
Now these are easy, so we should be able to rack these up.
We'll take action plan for 100.
Name one of two traits that female EM residents got discordant feedback on about compared to their male peers in a qualitative study that examined over 1,000 written evaluations. Oh, Ram, surprising that you might know this one.
What is assertiveness?
Yes. Autonomy and assertiveness. This is a journal club paper, if none of you guys have seen it yet. This is a follow-up paper to the paper that was presented a few years ago at our conference by Arjun Dayal and Dan O'Connell. This is where they looked at greater than 33,000 evaluations. They found no difference in PG1 evaluations by gender. By PG3, males outscored women across all 23 core competencies and the milestones. So this is an action plan. Recognize There's huge potential for implicit bias when we evaluate residents. And let's commit to giving a little bit better feedback, which is incredibly challenging. I want to thank Mike Jeopardy for sharing this with me. He got it from Lisa Stefanar at KSE Leadership. And this is a feedback formula. It's a great thing to have in your pocket at the end of a shift. How do you give great feedback? You ask for permission. It's now a good time to give feedback. You state the intention. I want you to be the best doctor you can be. You state the behavior as specifically as you can. You describe the impact as you see it. You check to make sure that you're getting the whole story right and ask their perspective. And then you identify a specific action plan moving forward. If you haven't seen this book, thanks for the feedback. One of the best books I've read in the last 10 years. It's by Stone. And in my podcast, X and Y, Mike Jeopardy and Adam Kellogg, the three of us did an hour session on how to give better feedback, and we included some of the challenges of different types of learners, which quite naturally, since I was involved, included sex and gender. We're going to go to this question because something happened to my computer. So, who's behind? We. So, editors, we'll say this is for 1,000 points. I don't think it is.
Yeah, let's do it.
A recent Georgia Tech study examining driverless cars' visual recognition systems suggests that currently people with this trait are more likely to get hit because the technology doesn't adequately recognize them.
You said it was for us, so we were taking our time.
Oh.
Go for it.
Well,
Go for
fine. That's fine.
I know. We feel sorry.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, it's probably pregnancy. Okay.
What is shorter people?
Shorter people.
No, that's not the answer.
Our buzzer's dead.
It's all right. There's a backup buzzer over there.
Go.
Got it.
Oh, well, thank you for fixing that. Clearly, women are very good with technology. Thank you.
So what is the answer?
We're going to try what is pregnancy.
No. Yes.
What's darker skin?
What is dark-skinned individuals? The driverless technology was about 5% less accurate.
So that means all of us lose 1,000 points?
Yep.
Well, they're both of us. They get it.
Yeah. Who is on the research teams is becoming increasingly important. That wasn't a question.
For 1,000 points?
Diversity.
That actually
Sounds like
wasn't a
more
question,
innovative.
but I actually appreciate your enthusiasm. So why don't you give everybody 1,000 points except for Rams, because you're still up by 5,000 points. For those of you who need a little bit of statistics, look at the Harvard Business Review. They can give you the financial model as to why it's important to have diverse teams. This is, if you are not a white guy, the study that makes you want to bump your head against the wall, because this study showed that if minorities and women actually bring up the idea of inclusion of diversity, they're looked at as less competent. So this needs to be championed by influencers. Action plan, do a gut check, who's on your project team, recruit somebody who thinks differently. All right, we have a few questions left, and we're going to actually end on time. So we're going to go back to these guys because they're still behind. Yeah. For $2 billion.
Billions. Oh, I didn't go to Evil Medical School for 6 years to be called Mr. Thank you very much.
If only Batman could come and help us with the last questions.
Oh, there we go.
All right. So what are you choosing? Basic definitions for 100. Sounds like a great idea. This refers to one's chromosomal and hormonal makeup.
Seriously.
What is sex? No. Oh, bored. You guys did buzz.
We did buzz. It
They
just doesn't.
buzz, but they got buzzer problems.
What is sex?
What is biological sex?
Or a billion.
A billion, yes. Gender refers to the roles and expectations a person has within a societal context. Every cell has a sex. Every person is gendered. All right, last 6 questions.
What is crash and boom for 200?
In 2017, males made up this percentage of people fatally injured in car crashes.
What are 70?
Excellent job. Woo!
For 2 minutes.
Again, let's look at that last one to remind us that gender influences our health. Males actually drive about 50% more than women, about an extra 5,000 to 6,000 miles on the road per year. And again, that's a lot because when most people, males and females, are in the car together and males are driving, men are also more likely to have increased alcohol and increased speed.
Now let's do action plan 200.
Oh, we did this one. So we'll go to the next
So
one.
we get 200 for that.
Dark skin, excellent, 200. We can do that. White guys are really important. The stakeholders and influencers again, just as a take-home point. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Crash, diversity 200.
In 2017, this percentage of EM residents were underrepresented minorities. Okay, audience members, who wants to take that one?
What is 15%?
That's close. Give him a t-shirt too, because he raised his hand. 13%. This is less than many of our colleagues in other specialties. This is a great article by Dr. Boatwright. What are some strategies we can do to increase diversity, increase engagement in minority students, tailored visiting clerkships, second look weekends? And this is a big shout out for Dr. Garrett from the Annals of Emergency Medicine. Highland's case study since 2006, they've increased their underrepresented minorities from 12% to 27%. And the question every program director wants to know is what? Well, what's the next question? Did they do the same on their boards? Yes. In that article, they nicely describe the snowball effect that if you do the things right to attract the right group of kids, you continually attract them in your next classes. This is a really, really scary statistic. 30 years ago, there were more black men applying to med school than there are today. That is horrifying. This is a great website for any of you guys who are mentoring or sponsoring young black men who are thinking about going to med school. All right, winding it down.
Broken heart for 100 people.
Who's more likely to get bystander CPR? If there's anything close, just give it to them.
Who are men?
What did you say?
Who are men?
Their answer is who are men. Men are more likely to get bystander CPR. Men are also more likely to go up and do bystander CPR. If you're teaching an AHA class, you might bring this up. About a 6% chance difference of getting CPR in a public setting. This directly affects survival. So they did a follow-up study last year as to why do people not get CPR if they're females. And this was a really interesting crowdsourced study. And they said, well, chances are people don't get CPR if they're women due to sexuality concerns. Nobody wants to be caught touching somebody else's breast if they're alive and well and they just fainted. They also are concerned that women might be more frail, so if you inadvertently start CPR, you might break their ribs more. If they didn't really need it, you might harm them. And then the last one's kind of a leftover from the Victorian era, that they're confused about what women in distress look like. So they just fainted, oh, they're probably not doing anything big difference.
I broke crash and boom for 100.
A 2015 evaluation of young Kansas drivers found this sex was much more likely to be T-boned.
It's gotta be female.
Drivers.
Oh.
Who are men?
You're-
Who are women?
Women. So there are actually different risk factors for
I'm recognizing your
accidents.
strategy.
That was brilliant. That's how we got to be on the board, that brilliant strategy. Women are more likely to be involved in side impact, guys in frontal, weekdays versus off-roads, intersections versus off-roads. Women are more likely to be involved with pedestrians, and men are more likely to be belted. All right, last question before we get to final Jeopardy. In 2018, the FDA approved 59 new drugs with trials involving 44,000 patients. This percentage of drug evaluation was done on patients older than 65.
Oh my God,
This is your
Dr.
thing.
Carpenter.
Chris.
That was they bought.
Maybe they'll get it wrong.
What is 8?
That's within 10%. 15%. So all of those senior drug lists that start scrolling across the ER floors, the studies are not being done on these folks. This is a great new thing put up by the FDA called trial snapshots. It goes into sex and minority inclusion and age. And it's now required for now new drug applications. All right, so we're going to go to Final Jeopardy. Please put down the amount that you want to.
I know.
What are the amounts that they can put down?
4,200.
All right, Rams.
Bet it all.
1 billion.
Wow. Wow! So I'm going to give the question, and then we're going to do the Spirit Award, and then we'll do this final award.
Sure. We're in Las Vegas.
So have you guys put your amounts down? Are you ready for the question? Amounts are down.
Yep.
Pens are down. What is the...
The editors are having some problems.
It's a revision.
What is the take-home mantra of this talk? Which was actually a slide. And actually might be associated with some T-shirts you're going to get.
Okay, so we have to write it down.
Yeah.
All right. Spirits Award. Rams. So how we're going to do this, if you want Rams to get the Spirit Award, you clap. If you want Board of Directors, when I go and put my hand above them. So who thinks Rams deserves the Spirit Award? Who thinks the editors deserve it? And who thinks the Board of Directors are worthy? Judges?
Rams.
Rams. Nice job, Rams. Who won the most tweets?
Rams.
Oh. You know, I think because you guys might
counts,
win the
that
whole
counts.
thing, if you don't mind,
And
the
who got
editors
them
would
their
actually
outfits?
like...
Who bought them their outfits?
All right. What is the take-home mantra of this talk?
Do we have to put our
You have to put your...
You have to write it down.
write it down, right? And bet our
This didn't quite work right.
Reject without review.
Sex matters. Sex matters. Sex matters. Final score. How many points did you put out? $1. Oh, which brings their total to? What is it? 4201.
2101. We bet.
Wait, but you didn't have 2,100.
So, we were willing to borrow it.
2100. Sex matters.
So we also bet 2,100, but there's a technicality. We added on the 1 billion for the question. And it was clearly 1 billion. Just FYI.
All right, what a close competition. You guys, thank you for joining us. Please give a round of applause for our participants.